All right, we'll go ahead and get started today. Welcome everyone, and thank you for tuning in to today's webinar, Using RealCare Baby Remotely, 3 Tips for Engaging Students. My name is Emily Klinsky. I am on the marketing team here at Realityworks. I will be behind the scenes assisting our presenter today, Denise DuBois. Denise is one of our product managers here at Realityworks. She has been with us for a little over 10 years and is a frequent presenter, trainer, blogger, for all things related to RealCare Baby, as well as other related products. She has over 20 years of education, marketing, product design, and curriculum writing experience, so she's a fantastic resource for today's webinar. Before we get started, I do want to cover a couple things. First, today's presentation is being recorded, and all attendees will receive a link to that recording, as well as a link to the PowerPoint slides and a handout with the links that Denise will be going over today. You should see that email within 24 hours after the webinar. We will have a Q&A session at the end, so if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat feature or the Q&A feature at the bottom of the chat screen, or Zoom screen. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to Denise to get us going.
Thanks, Emily, and welcome to our session, everyone. This session is designed for those with active RealCare programs, or even if you don't have RealCare Baby, you may be interested in starting one. So I think you'll find it valuable either way. But we're going to cover strategic ways to use RealCare Baby in live, remote, hybrid environments, so all sorts of different ways. We hope to discuss ways to maximize the use of a RealCare Baby simulation experience with students, especially as they're learning remotely. But before we kick off this morning, we would like to ask just one polling question that we would ask you to weigh in on. And we'll give you about 10 seconds to do so. And we are just interested in knowing how many of you actually have RealCare Baby and are using it. We have just another minute before we end our poll. Looks like an overwhelming amount of you are RealCare Baby users already, so that's really helpful information to know. All right, Em, you want to go ahead and end our poll, and we'll go ahead and we'll move on. And it looks like 91% currently are using RealCare Baby. So here's just a little bit about what we'll be discussing today. We're going to talk about ways to run RealCare Baby simulations remotely. We are going to talk about how to make your program successful in all sorts of different learning environments, and then how to use the curricular assets that are available to you, whether you're a RealCare Baby customer or not, to maximize student outcomes. And we have some actual units that we're going to be providing to you today that you'll be able to use in a remote learning environment. So tip number 1, ways to run a RealCare Baby simulation remotely. Can you do that? Well, that's a really good question. So in this section of our webinar, we're going to discuss how to do that, but we're really going to also brainstorm a bunch of different creative ways to try to do that. So first of all, no matter what kind of situation you're in, whether it's in person, hybrid, or fully remote, here are a few guidelines for disinfecting and cleaning baby that are on our website and available at the link provided on the screen in front of you. You can remove and wash all the clothing. You can use rubbing alcohol or disinfectant wipes, which contain an alcohol concentration of 60% or better. This is an antimicrobial solution, and it kills 99% of germs within 10 to 30 seconds. We recommend gently wiping the baby down in accessories and letting the baby and accessories air dry for 30 minutes, but you wouldn't want to use bleach to disinfect. So we know that some customers have chosen not to use car seats, but they are sealing all the supplies and accessories in bags or totes and dispersing them that way. So yes, you can still certainly send baby out successfully, and those are just a few tips. And so we wanted to let you know that that document does exist at the link provided in front of you. Now for planning. Having students do a RealCare simulation is inherently a remote learning experience anyway. You program the baby, you send it out, and then the results of the experience come back. So here are 3 good questions to ask yourself, whether you are in an in-class environment, hybrid, or totally remote. How many RealCare Babies do you have to use that are available? How many students do you wish to have go through that experience? And how much time do you have in your course? Also, how much time do you want to allow for baby to be home with your students? So those are just some good practice questions to think about. Now, if you're in an in-class environment, of course, you can deploy the simulation experience normally. Preparing students for that, we would say use those care simulation directions in the curricula. There's a readiness quiz that is also helpful. There's a 9-minute participant care video, which really gives students a good idea of what to expect. And then, of course, if you're fortunate enough to be in class, you can use Baby in demo mode to get the practice. But what happens if you're not in a fully in-person mode, but you're in a hybrid situation? First of all, just like in-person planning, decide how much time you'd like to dedicate to the program in general. Is it 1 week, 1 month, an entire semester? And that'll determine the length of the simulation each student will go through. Now, you'd want to allow at least a couple weeks before you wish to deploy Baby to start the program, so you can go through the materials, have a checklist of everything that you need to do to prepare so that you can send those babies out. There's nothing is worse than realizing like the day before you're out of things like wristbands and so forth. Go through the curriculum to make sure that if there's anything you need to make copies of or you need to become familiar with, you're ready to go with all the activities. You choose to send out those permission forms and things that involve getting a signature. Make sure you build in plenty of time for that. Now, if you are specifically in a school that's in school maybe a couple days a week and then remote for a couple days a week, you could prepare a master calendar of the month or the semester if you wish, where you kind of sketch out the days you're going to have students in person and then how many babies you have and so forth, because we'd recommend then, of course, that the in-person days you go through all the recommended resources and demo mode and things like that, but then the simulation experience can happen, of course, when the babies are on their remote days at home. So that's just a really good way to be able to still deploy the program if you're in that hybrid situation. And again, you can choose the length of the time based on your school calendar and things like that. So when you're programming in the software for a hybrid, think of things like making sure you've charged your babies fully to ensure that there's enough power to get them through the days when they will be at home and not on site. Determine the simulation experience length that you want to have students go through at home. Now, we recommend usually a minimum of 2 to 3 days. In the software, you can choose longer if you wish, but that's just something to think about ahead of time. And of course, in the software itself, there are many different considerations to think about, like scheduled difficulty level. Do you want to be easy, medium, difficult, or random? Quiet times, all of those kind of things. But a hybrid environment or schedule at your school is still very, very doable for that RealCare Baby deployment situation. So here's a few things to think about in the Control Center software. So again, when you're programming, if you want to save some time, use a class roster, have that in front of you. Decide if you're going to allow students to choose the gender, the skin tone or not, whether they're going to be able to name their baby or if you're going to assign the name, so you can kind of have all that information in front of you. You choose your start and end times based on the days when students will be home, and you've got your planning calendar you've prepared, so you're ready for that. So if your students are home Wednesday through Friday, decide what works best. Maybe you want them to have a 3-day simulation. It doesn't have to extend 5 days over the weekend, but you could if you wished. And then they just have to return it when it's that next in-person day in school again. So again, what experience do you wish them to have as far as difficulty level? And are you going to allow for any quiet times during the simulation? Now, what can you do if your students are 100% remote? They are not on site. I'm hoping to share a couple of ideas that you can consider. First of all, are your students able to come to school to get anything? If so, you could potentially deploy Baby by programming everything ahead and sanitizing the baby, putting the accessories and supplies in a tote or some kind of a sealed bag. Set the baby someplace where students can pick them up in a no contact zone, perhaps. You could perhaps establish a date and time or an hour where students could come pick them up and again return them at the end without having to be in contact with anyone. So of course we want to follow those CDC guidelines for interactions. Maybe you could make your Monday mornings your pickup time and your Fridays your return date, but that again is only if you're in a situation where students would even be able to do that. Something to consider. Now, you may be in a situation where you just simply can't deploy RealCare Baby physically at all. So in that case, how can you teach childcare concepts remotely? So we're going to throw some ideas out to you, although we really believe, of course, nothing can take the place of the hands-on learning with a resource like RealCare Baby. In fact, in all of our CTE courses, by the very nature of that, they are hands-on. But perhaps educating through a pandemic means we really have to try to think differently just right now. So remember, you can teach all of the content in our RealCare curricula that you have access to, and we're going to share the free link a little later on in the webinar. So you have all of that content, all the activities and things. However, when you get to that simulation lesson, and we know we can't deploy baby, here are a few things you could consider. First of all, is that good old egg baby project where you could have students do that at home. Now you could still, of course, use the RealCare Baby curriculum to teach all those infant care skills and activities and instruction, but then replace that infant care simulation lesson with the egg baby projects. And there are many sources to go to if you want to get a little bit of insight on how other instructors do that project. And I've got a few links on the screen in front of you here. Now the first link is a lesson plan. So each pupil in the class, could have an egg that they care for, as the parent or the caregiver. They'd keep a journal, perform a cost analysis, and check in at the beginning of each day. Now the second link is a lesson plan, and it also includes a rubric for a project like that. So I thought that might be good information if you're interested in something like that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Now, there's also videos out there that are about egg baby projects that you can find on YouTube. And the first one that I found was a good instructional video on how to prepare to deploy that type of a project for at home with your students. And then the second video is a short video that features students sharing their experience. And I think that could again be something that if you do a project like that, you could assign your students to have to do some kind of video journal that they post. And those are really fun for students to share and watch either on YouTube or other social media. So those are just a few things to consider. Now, there are several apps available that provide students with infant care simulation experiences of sorts. Now, we cannot speak to the effectiveness of all of these because we haven't tried them. I'm just trying to think outside the box and throw some things at you that might be worth considering. So you could teach, again, that lesson content from the RealCare curricula, but when you get to that simulation lesson, if you don't have RealCare Baby, you might be able to use one of these infant simulation apps for that simulation experience. So the first link and the second link are just a couple of apps, and there's several out there. And then the third link I found was a link where it actually identifies what this person thought were the 10 best infant care games out there. So, and we will be providing all of these links in a handout after the webinar for you for ease of use as well. Now, another source of information or activities that you might wish to consider are virtual instruction on childcare topics. And here's a couple that I've recently seen mentioned on fax chats and discussion boards and things. And the first one's called the Virtual Lab School. Again, I can't speak to the effectiveness or the content, but I did see that they have childcare topics and things of that nature, things that align with the CDA certification at that online virtual school. And then Pearson also has something called My Virtual Child, where you can create a simulated infant to care for online. Both of these things do have a cost associated, but they do exist. So we just want to point that out. And I actually did find a dissertation or a research paper about the effectiveness of using virtual simulation programs to teach child development. And I thought that was an interesting read if you decide to do an approach like that. So that link is here for you as well if you'd like to read more about that. But just to review, if you're able to deploy and use RealCare Baby, here's an infographic that can be downloaded that gives a really nice reminder for the 7 steps you can take in order for successful deployment. Again, we know not all of these may be possible in some environments right now. But first of all, give your babies a full charge if you're able to use them. Ensure the software is up to date. Practice in demo mode if you're able to get them in students' hands. Keep organized using those bins and totes, checklists, and things like that. You make use of our free baby care app. We'll be talking about that more in the next section of the webinar. Clean and prepare for the next simulation. You'll follow those CDC guidelines and then reflect by giving your students the opportunity to reflect on that RealCare Baby experience if they're able to take baby, or if they're able to do another alternative assignment or simulation experience. Help them make those connections and ensure that they've learned those very important infant care skills and concepts. So those are just a few ideas. Tip number 2, how to make your program successful in a remote learning environment. Now, there is a free RealCare Baby app that students can download for free on their iPhones and Android app stores. And in this app, there are 4 different video clips showing each of those 4 care events: the burping, the rocking, the diaper changing, and the feeding. Now, you could integrate the use of these 4 videos with lesson plans that are available to you in our basic infant care curriculum. Now, the lessons that are in that curriculum would easily provide you with 3 to 4 hours of content remotely, or 3 to 4 lessons. So we have one on soothing a crying infant, and you could pair that with the rocking video in the app. There's a lesson on holding and feeding a baby, and you could use the burping and feeding videos from the app a lot to show students how to do that. And then there is an entire lesson on bathing and diapering, and you could also use the app which features the diaper change video. So those 4 video clips could very nicely be used by students to access them. It's a free app on their smartphones. We know students all have smartphones, and then you could integrate that into those lessons that you have access to. Now, while these lessons usually use the RealCare Baby in class to give that hands-on practice, students can access those videos and then complete some of the activities in those lessons. Or you could prepare lectures or even independent reading to share the information found in these lessons. So there's a lot of different ways you could be creative. Now, talking about the use of the participant care video to prepare your students, this is that free 9-minute video that you could share with students to show what it's like to go through that simulation experience at home. However, because it shows all of those 4 care events, again, you could have students watch it and you could pair it with those lessons from basic infant care that I mentioned in the previous slide to create some remote learning lessons and activities. Now, you could also share some of the YouTube videos showcasing student experiences. Now, there are many, many out there, and they're hilarious, and students really get a kick out of watching some of those. So that could also be a source of something that you share in a remote learning environment that would give them something fun to watch. Now, use the free resources. You have access to all RealCare curricula at the link above. There are dozens and dozens of lessons and PowerPoints, hundreds of pages of information and activities. There are 4 curricula. There's a basic infant care, which focuses on that infant career skills. There's parenting. There's a healthy choices, which is more of a teen pregnancy prevention. And there's also a middle school student called life skills and healthy choices for middle school students. So lots and lots of stuff at that curriculum link. Now, we've also created a version of the curricula documents so that they can easily be used in Google Docs. So to do this, you would click on the link that we've got on the screen in front of you, and you would go to where it says Facts, Infant Simulations, or Infant Simulators, and you'd click on RealCare Baby. And right underneath that is where you would click on the Google Docs, and you'd find a zip file for each curricula that includes all of the handouts, the assessments, and the activities. And they're ready to be used easily in Google Docs. And finally, there are many archived and upcoming free webinars for PACS teachers also that include more activities, information, and ideas for classroom use. So we just wanted to make you aware of all the different things that you have at your disposal to use. Now, if you are an instructor with access to any of these products that you see on the screen in front of you, and we know many of you have purchased these over the years, you could create your own demonstration videos and post them online to share with students. You could prepare demo videos using RealCare Baby. Of course, that would showcase any of those infant care skills, but you could also do a unit on infant health and safety. We have dozens of lessons available in the curricula that I talked about that are on those topics. And then with these specialty babies, you could actually do multiple mini lessons using each one, recording and demo. For example, for shaken baby, you could demonstrate what happens to the infant's brain during a shaking. If you have the drug-affected baby, you could show the baby shaking, going through withdrawal, and those cries that cannot be soothed. With our fetal alcohol syndrome baby, preemie baby, and Down syndrome infants, you could point out all of the physical features shown on these babies. in a video clip, and you could put that out to students either on your LMS system or however you're able to communicate with them in a remote learning environment. Again, remember, each of these specialty babies comes with their own curricula and information that can be shared in an LMS or Google Classroom environment. We've tried to make it as easy as possible. So here are a few best practices to think about as you use RealCare Baby and some of the assets. First of all, there's no better way to learn the ins and outs of RealCare Baby than to do a simulation yourself. If you've got a free evening, schedule a simulation, you take baby home and see what the students have to do so you can completely understand what they're going through during a simulation. Now we know in a normal school year, baby is usually sent home and it's taken out, and the community sees baby. They understand what it is. It's very visible, and it's a visible way of showing what the school district is doing to educate students. So use things like social media or the local media outlets to get the word out about the great program and the things that you're doing with your RealCare program. Now, one thing you could consider doing is inviting guest speakers on a video platform for discussion, or as a panel, like on a Zoom meeting. You could have law enforcement speak to the class about things like shaken baby, child abuse, and the legal consequences of mishandling a child. You could bring in healthcare professionals like a nurse to talk about shaken baby syndrome, child abuse, and even the medical consequences of mishandling an infant, fetal alcohol syndrome, or how drugs affect an unborn baby. Social workers would make a great speaker about things like foster care for an infant, or what happens if you are a young parent and you have your parental rights terminated. How difficult is it to get your child back? What you have to do. So just a few things to think about there. Specific again to programming. Think about the students that you are going to be using with RealCare Baby, and think about the experience you want them to have. Baby is very customizable for students of all different ranges of abilities and so forth. If it's someone that's a high-risk individual, you might wish to do it on difficult. If you've got special needs students, perhaps you'd want to do it on easy. But it's a good thing to think about how you'd like to deploy those if you're able to. There are 15 different care schedules, so it's very customizable to many student experiences. And again, if you're able to send baby out at all, we recommend more than one night if possible. One night is really fun, but we found if you can do more than one night, 2 to 3, they really are more learning more what it's like to be completely consumed by having to take care of an infant. It will wake them up, it will make them tired, and they will really, experience it fully if you can do 2 to 3 nights. So tip number 3. Using the curricular assets to maximize student outcomes. So let's talk a little bit about that. First of all, I'm going to share this link with you one more time. This is where you get all of that free curricula, not just those 4 baby curricula, but you have curricula that go with infant choking, CPR, all of the specialty babies, geriatric things. Pregnancy profile or pregnancy simulation curriculum has 12 lessons all about fetal development and labor and birth. So you have tons of information available, and we want to make sure that you're able to access it. So you just go to the link again, and for whatever topic you're interested in, you click on that product, and that will take you to the curricula, and you'll find slides, instructions, handouts, and even assessment tools for all of that. And again, here's just a review of those 4 curricula that specifically are aligned with RealCare Baby. All of these culminate with that infant simulation experience using RealCare Baby. However, I've given you a few ideas for if you can't deploy or can't do that infant simulation experience with RealCare Baby, what alternatives could you use for that particular lesson in these curricula? Also, in the curricula, there is an alternative research project with a grading rubric that's available to you if you'd rather have students do a research project during that lesson to take the place of that simulation experience. So now I'm going to show you how you could create what I'm calling a mini unit. It's a 5-day unit for remote teaching using our basic infant care curriculum. And I've kind of got the 5 days laid out here by topic. Day 1, soothing a crying infant. Day 2, all about shaken baby syndrome. Day 3, holding and feeding. Day 4, bathing and diapering. And day 5, childcare career focus. So I'm going to take you through each of these 5 days worth and what I would suggest doing for remote learning for each day. So first of all, I would begin by accessing the Soothing a Crying Infant lesson. It's found in Basic Infant Care. And there are a bunch of really good discussion questions in there that you could post in a discussion forum or as a writing activity. There's also a slide presentation that you could make available to your students, and then give them access to a few of the activities, the worksheets. We have Why Do Infants Cry exercise and the 5 S's of Soothing an Infant. So you could post those in your LMS system or give students access to them. Again, there's discussion questions and slides from the lesson that you could give them access to. And then you could supplement this with a short video on the 5S method for soothing a baby. It's less than 2 minutes long, and it's available at the link that you see there. And of course, you could embed that link in your lesson, and that would give you a very nice lesson for day 1 of this unit. Now, moving on to day 2, your focus is going to be on shaken baby syndrome. And you're going to begin by sharing a video link of when babies cry. It's a 13-minute video. You can see I've got it up, the link on the screen here in front of you. And it's a great intro to sharing with students what happens. Next, then what I would do is you have the what happens during a shaking simulation. Now, if you have a shaken baby simulator, you could demonstrate live, or you could prepare a simulation recording video showing that. Now, if you don't have access to that, there's actually a simulation video on YouTube at the link that I've got there on what happens during a shaking. So you could share that with your students as well. Then give your student access to the following worksheets. There's one called the Infant Facts Worksheet and a Shaken Baby Syndrome Facts handout. And then there's an Ideas for Coping Worksheet. And then it ends up with My Plan to Manage Frustration, where students use all of the tips that they've learned and they put into writing their plan for how they would manage to soothe a crying baby, or how they would safely manage if they were with an infant that's crying and cannot be soothed. So that would make a great day 2 lesson. Day 3 is all about holding and feeding. Now, first of all, you would there's something called Hold Me. It's an introduction, discussion, and activity in the lesson. And then you could go into somehow giving your students holding and handling an infant demo or practice. You could share the slide information from the lesson. You could post those video clips or have students access them found in the RealCare Baby app or that participant care video. Again, you could prepare your own short holding and feeding demo using your own RealCare babies, or there are videos out there that are about holding and feeding a newborn. And I've included one here. Here's a link on the screen in front of you you could embed that in your lesson and share that with students as well. Then there are some activities in that lesson. They're all about bottle feeding and breastfeeding. So there's information, and then there's some worksheets that students would complete. And again, you would be able to post those out on your Google Classroom or your LMS system for students to access. And that would make a great day 3 lesson all about holding and feeding. Now, the next day you're going to have bathing and diapering. And there's an activity in the lesson all about disposable diapers versus cloth. So you could have them do that activity, give them access to that. And then the next thing you could do is a bathing and diapering an infant demo or practice. So you've got slide information available that has some photos in it all about how to do it properly. There's handouts in the lesson that you could share. Again, there's video clips on diapering an infant in that RealCare Baby app, the participant care video. Again, you can always prepare your own demo video or use one on YouTube. And I've got a link here that's all about bathing and diapering a newborn infant. And it's not very long, but it's just one. And there are many out there. So this is just one that you could consider. And then you could also post discussion questions in the review activity online in either a discussion forum or just as a written activity at the end of that lesson. So that gives you day 4. And then you could end that week on the 5th day with a childcare career focus day. Now, first of all, we've got a lesson in the basic infant care curriculum that's it's called Caregiver Self-Assessment. And it asks students questions about their own caregiving characteristics, and so they do kind of a self-assessment. So they can complete that first, thinking about their own skills. And then after that, you could there's a handout and information sheet. It's all about caregiver characteristics. So you could give them access to that. And then there's something called the important role of the caregiver. And there's analyzing caregiver scenarios. So there's a bunch of scenarios students will read through, and then they have some like debriefing questions to answer about each of those scenarios, where they are actually analyzing how the caregiver has handled that scenario as a child care provider, what they've done great, and what they might want to do differently next time that would be even better. And then if you wish to even do more on career exploration or things of that nature, there are child care career videos out there on YouTube. Here's just one sample that I found, but there are many, many more. So, but that whole thing there would be a nice day 5 to complete a unit all about infant care skills and infant child care careers. So that's just one way you could use some of those free lessons that you have access to in the RealCare curricula to create some of that remote learning opportunity. Now, I've got a couple other starter unit ideas for you that I'm going to share in the next couple of slides. First of all, we do have that parenting curriculum that has, I think, a dozen different lessons in it. But what you could do, I thought, taking these 5 lessons would create, again, a nice 1-week unit all about parenting. So there's lessons on attachment and autonomy. There's one all about nurturing young children, education and literacy development, recreation and play, and then ending the week with parenting styles. That's always one of the favorite lessons, because students, again, are charged with doing a self-assessment of how they would parent. It gives all sorts of scenarios, and then based on their answers, there's 4 parenting styles, and it tells them which one they kind of gravitate toward, and the pros and cons of that, and things of that nature. So you can see all of these lessons come with activities, slide presentations, handouts, and those things we've made Google Classroom friendly for you. So you can pick and choose, but you can easily see how you could have a nice parenting 5-day unit for remote learning as well. And then the third idea I had for a unit, for a 1-week unit, is all about pregnancy and childbirth. So day 1, you could do all about pregnancy. And remember, you have access to our whole curriculum that goes with our pregnancy simulation called Understanding Pregnancy, and just loaded with all sorts of things related to pregnancy. So you could do that. There's a prenatal development lessons in there as well. Alcohol and drugs and fetal development. So if you have the FAS or drug-affected babies, those could certainly be used on that day 3 to do video demonstrations and things like that. Day 4, you could talk all about the birth process and things like that. And then day 5 is the cost of raising a child once they're born. So again, there's plenty of content from those 5 lessons that you have available from either the pregnancy profile simulation curriculum, and also in the RealCare curriculum that you could easily put together 5 to 10 days worth of remote learning content as well. So those are my 3 big areas of suggestions for how to use RealCare Baby and some of our program assets in a remote learning environment. So at this point, you'd say, now what? What do we do? Well, you've been given a lot of information today. So what I would do is I decide, first of all, are you able to use RealCare Baby at all? If you can, great. If you cannot, think about an alternative simulation experience, whether it be an app, a game, Egg Baby, or do you want them to do that alternative research project in the curriculum? But what do you want to do during that simulation experience lesson that could take the place of that if you're totally not able to do that at all? Explore our free assets that are available. There's so many. I think you'll don't reinvent the wheel. There's just a lot out there. And then choose just a couple of them and try them. Maybe you end up doing one of these mini units for 1 week. You'd have enough content, I think, for students to work remotely for an hour each day on different child care, parenting, child development types of topics. Could certainly go longer than 5 days, but if you want to start small, that's what I would say. Choose a few activities, choose a few lessons, and see how it goes. So now at this point, we would open it up for any Q&A that you would have on any of the content and ideas that we've had today. And Emily's been our moderator, and she's been looking at our chat and keeping track of all the questions. So at this point, Em, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if we have any questions.
Yep, one just popped up and can I go back and rewatch the webinar? We will be sending out a link of the recorded webinar after. So just look out for that link and you can rewatch it. And Denise, we did have some questions on the batteries. If the baby loses their charge, does it hold the data from that point that it lost the charge?
It does. And on the simulation report, it will say battery shut down so that you know what happened.
And then how many days can the battery last?
Usually, if you charge it fully, it will last around 5 days.
Okay, and then are we currently running any promotions or discounts on the babies?
That's a great question. If you go on our website, we do have a page all about some of our special promotions and things like that happening right now. Em, are you aware of any specifically?
Yeah, right now we do have the $100 trade-in discount, as well as you would also get a free car seat detection with every RealCare Baby purchase. So we do have those two promotions, and I will include that link in the chat as well. I also do want to mention we are having a RealCare Baby celebration, and you can enter to win some Realityworks prizes, such as like a preemie baby, some supplies for the RealCare Baby, and every person that enters, we do donate $5 to the Family and Consumer Science Public Awareness Campaign. So I'll include that link in the chat as well if you want to go fill that out to win some free stuff as well. So we are doing that for RealCare Baby as well.
Terrific.
And then Denise, how long can batteries charge for?
We recommend that you charge it overnight. 6 to 8 hours is plenty, and that should fully charge your batteries for them to be used for a simulation. Now, you could, if you're worried about sending those babies home for multiple days with students, and if you're afraid the battery is going to run out, you can just say maybe do the simulation 2 or 3 days, but if they're home for 5, it just turns off those last 2 days, and they don't have the simulation going on the entire time the baby's home with them. So that's an option too.
And then would you recommend leaving the baby plugged in for a week long?
No. The reason I say that is because if you want to help prolong your battery life over the life of your baby, if you keep them plugged in for days, weeks, and months at a time, it can actually drain your battery life faster. So we recommend just do it overnight till your simulator's charged up fully, send it out with students, and it'll start to run down again. And then when it comes back, charge it up overnight again. But our product support team does not recommend keeping it plugged in multiple days, weeks, and months.
And then I'm not seeing any other questions coming through.
Okay.
I think that's it for questions.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for participating today. Be watching for the video recording link, and we will be having a handout that has a master of all of the links shared in here as well, so it makes it easier to use those links. So thank you for participating, and we hope that you are able to use RealCare Baby and many of those assets in your program this year.